London, May 19th, 1536. A leaden dawn presses down upon the Tower of London, its cold, unforgiving light seeping through the mist and settling over ancient stones that have borne silent witness to so many secrets. In the inner courtyard, a scaffold stands, pale wood, set low to the ground as if designed to bring its subject closer to the chill earth. Unlike the brutal English axe that has marked so many ends today, an unfamiliar sword glimmers in the hand of a foreign executioner, its presence both anomaly and omen. The crowd gathers in the half-light, their breath rising in anxious clouds, their voices hushed with a mixture of awe and dread. For today, a queen is to die, the first in England's long and restless history. The air is thick with rumor, with the electric sense that fate itself has chosen this morning to mete out judgment. Within the stone walls, behind a door heavy with locks, and memory, Anne Boleyn awakens to her final day. For 17 nights she has lain in a chamber that has shrunk around her hopes, its silence broken only by the soft weeping of the women who have refused to abandon her. Though stripped of crown and certainty, Anne's bearing is still unmistakable grace, lingering in every gesture, dignity persisting even in captivity. Her remaining ladies' faces drawn, but hands, gentle, help her prepare. She selects a mantle of somber gray, its fur lining a small comfort against the morning chill, and beneath it, a crimson bodice, a deliberate choice, both pragmatic and proud, the color hiding whatever final mark might be left by the sword. The ritual of dressing is slow, filled with unspoken sorrow, but Anne's composure never wavers. She is seen to touch her slender neck with a quiet, ironic grace. "I have but a little neck," she remarks, the faintest smile flickering at her lips. A moment of dark humor, fragile yet defiant, that will linger in the memories of all who hear it. Outside, the scaffold waits its blank boards, expectant and silent. As the day unfolds, Anne's mind must surely race backwards and forwards, a labyrinth of memory and dread. Daughter of Thomas Boleyn, diplomat and dreamer, and Elizabeth Howard of noble blood. Anne's childhood was spent in courts of subtle power, most notably in France, where she drank deeply of the Renaissance, its art, its wit, its cruel refinements. Returning to England, she did not fit the mold of beauty cherished by poets' olive-skinned, dark-haired eyes, alive with intelligence and hidden fire. But what she lacked in fair complexion, she more than made up for in presence, her mind sharp, her conversation quick and unpredictable, her ambitions quietly smoldering. This was the woman who captured the restless heart of Henry VIII, who refused to yield to him, as her sister Mary once had, and instead held the king at bay, forcing his desire to transform itself into promise and upheaval. It was for Anne that Henry severed the most sacred bonds, his marriage, his faith, the peace of his realm, casting the kingdom into a storm of uncertainty and change. But the favor of kings is as fickle as the weather, and in the labyrinthine shadows of court, intrigue, admiration twists easily into suspicion. Anne, once a symbol of hope and revolution, now stands condemned, isolated by fear, betrayed by rumor, and judged by the very world she had dared to remake. As the morning stretches onward, the weight of what is to come hangs in the air like a curse, and the silence of the tower deepens, a silence heavy with judgment, regret, and the cold certainty that no crown can shield its wearer forever from the darkness that waits at history's end. She would not surrender, not even to a king. "I will not be your concubine," she is said to have told Henry, her voice steady as cold steel. "If you want my heart and body, you must give me a crown." It was a daring wager, one that would alter the very shape of a kingdom. For 7 long years, from 1526 to 1533, Henry's obsession with Anne Boleyn burned so fiercely it consumed the old order. He cast aside his marriage, defied the Pope, tore his country from Rome, and forged a new church with himself at its head, all to possess her. The cost was incalculable: alliances shattered, altars destroyed, and faith remade in his image. In the shadows of January 1533, Anne and Henry wed in secret hope, already swelling in her womb. When September came, the child who arrived, Elizabeth, was not the son the king's heart had so fervently demanded. Anne's reign would flicker only 3 short years, yet its light was sharp and impossible to ignore. With keen wit and unflinching resolve, she encouraged the reading of forbidden texts, offered sanctuary to reformers, and let the English tongue ring through sacred scripture. To those who admired her, Anne was a visionary. To her foes, a cunning heretic with a mind too dangerous for any woman to possess. The walls of court were thick with intrigue, and as time crept on, Anne's womb proved a battleground as fraught as any political front. After Elizabeth's hopes rose, then broke her next pregnancies, ended in miscarriage, the last a son lost before he could take a breath. For a king gripped by the ghost of dynasty, these failures were wounds that would not heal. As Henry's affections cooled, enemies pressed closer, none more quietly relentless than Thomas Cromwell. In April 1536, the tide turned with chilling precision. Cromwell spun a web of rumor and accusation, assembling a list of supposed sins that read more like nightmare than fact adultery, with 5 men, her own brother among them, and a plot against the king's very life. On May 2nd, Anne was seized and delivered into the Tower of London, its walls swallowing her hopes and echoing with the footsteps of the damned. The accusations grew monstrous in the gloom, each more impossible than the last. Her trial, convened on May 15th, was a masquerade of justice, its outcome written in the air before a word was spoken. She faced her judges, nearly all her adversaries alone, denied counsel or confrontation, yet answered with a grace so serene that one witness said she seemed not a woman, but an angel. It was for nothing. The sentence had been decided long before Anne ever entered the chamber. Guilty condemned, the old sentence of burning replaced at the last moment, perhaps for mercy, perhaps for the sake of appearances, with the promise of a cleaner end. Henry summoned an executioner from France, a man famed for his skill with the sword. So Anne waited in the Tower's silent chill, the murmurs of London pressing in the crowd, gathering beneath grey skies, and every echo, every flicker of torchlight, reminding her that favor is fleeting, and even queens can be broken upon the scaffold. May 19th, 1536, dawn crept across the cold stones of the Tower of London, painting the sky a bruised grey as Anne Boleyn waited heart-pounding for the end she had already steeled herself to face. Yet as the hour of her execution arrived, word came she would wait still longer, her death postponed until noon. Time stretched agonizingly, the walls closing in as she paced and prayed, every tick of the clock an accusation. The silence pressed heavily around her, broken only by the low murmur of prayers and the repeated desperate invocation, "Lord, have mercy on me." In those hours she took communion, her hands trembling, her mind restless with memories and fears. Kneeling before the sacred host, she swore with a clear voice, "For my salvation I am free of the things for which I was condemned." The words hovered in the air, unheard by those who mattered most, lingering in the gloom like the final embers of hope. At noon, the distant thud of drums summoned her to destiny. Anne bid a gentle, aching farewell to her ladies, pressing small tokens, prayer book, handkerchief, jewelry, into their hands as if to leave behind fragments of her story. "Remember me and how I end," she whispered, the simple plea carving itself into the memory of the chamber. Cloaked in grey and crimson, she walked to the scaffold with a dignity that hushed the gathered crowd. The onlookers, fewer than expected, bared their heads in somber respect. The air was dense with an unspoken understanding that history was pausing to witness a tragedy. Upon the scaffold, Anne was offered her final words. Her voice rang out steady and deliberate, measured to meet the moment and its silent witnesses. "Good Christians, I come here to die according to the law, and therefore I will speak nothing against it. I am come hither to accuse no man, nor to speak anything of that whereof I am accused. I pray God save the king, and send him long to reign over you, for a gentler nor a more merciful prince was there never, and to me he was ever a good, a gentle and sovereign lord. The crowd listened, struck by the composure of a woman who refused to rail against injustice, who sheltered her daughter and the fragile dignity of the crown in the face of betrayal. Her calm, her refusal to curse those who destroyed her, was both a last act of loyalty and a subtle indictment echoing in the hush like the tolling of a bell. Anne removed her mantle and cap, handing them to her ladies, who struggled to hold back tears. One last time she pressed gold coins into the hand of the executioner, a ritual payment acknowledgement of the fate she could not escape. She knelt on the straw, realizing there would be no block for her head, only the sword, silent and unseen. A blindfold was tied over her eyes, the world disappearing into darkness. Her lips moved ceaselessly in prayer, her voice trembling but unbroken. "Jesus, receive my soul. O Lord God, have pity on my soul." The crowd held its breath as the executioner, in the French tradition, offered a final merciful deception. "Where is my sword?" he called, though the blade waited poised behind her. In that instant, before the silence was broken forever, Anne Boleyn, Queen Mother and legend, surrendered herself to the cold, uncertain mercy of history. Her courage and suffering etched forever into the stones of the tower and the hearts of all who watched her fall. When Anne Boleyn stepped onto the scaffold within the cold embrace of the Tower of London, the world seemed to contract into a narrow corridor of silence and shadow. The sky above was leaden, the air unmoving, heavy with judgment. She stood alone, ringed by watchful eyes, some curious, some mournful, others simply afraid, her composure fragile but unbroken. Even as she knelt, the rough planks beneath her felt less like a floor and more like a waiting grave. The crowd pressed closer, but a chill ran through them, as if all warmth had been banished from this place of endings. Her heart beat out a lonely, frantic rhythm as she waited for the end, every sense sharpened by dread and the weight of all that had come before, whispered accusations, lost allies, and the irrevocable descent from the dizzying heights of a queen's favor. A voice broke the hush, measured, foreign, practiced in the art of finality. Anne turned her head, and in that moment time seemed to hold its breath. The act itself was mercifully swift, yet in the hush that followed no triumph rang out, only a suffocating pause, as if the whole court, king and kingdom alike, felt the chill of what had just been done. The executioner raised her head, uttering the ritual curse, but the silence that answered was thick with uncertainty, a murmur of unease running through the gathered crowd. The towers echoed with cannon fire, their thunder rolling over the Thames, not as tribute, but as grim signal, a coded message to Henry at Whitehall, announcing that the way had been cleared for a new beginning. The very next day he would claim another bride. The machinery of succession ground onward, heedless of the ghosts left behind. Anne's body was gathered by trembling hands, her loyal ladies moving as if through a dream, forced to improvise with an arrow chest for a coffin. There was no royal dignity in this hurried ritual, no marble or gilded memorial, only a plain wooden box carried through corridors of stone to the chapel of St. Peter ad Vincula. There, beneath the indifferent slabs, she was laid to rest in anonymity. Above her, no monument, no epitaph, only the persistent shadow of royal will. Henry's judgment did not end with the grave. He decreed the destruction of Anne's portraits, the erasure of her emblems, the purging of her name from every record, a deliberate unraveling of memory itself. For a time it seemed as if she had vanished from the world, reduced to whispers, rumors, and the shudder of dread in empty corridors. But the tide of history cannot be dammed forever. In a twist worthy of fate's cruelest designs, it was Anne's daughter, Elizabeth, who would claim the throne 23 years later. Elizabeth's long and luminous reign would eclipse her father's ambitions, bringing peace and glory to the very realm that had once cast her mother into darkness. Anne's legacy, once buried beneath stone and silence, now shimmered in the golden light of her daughter's rule, proving that memory, however battered, can outlast the sharpest blade. Centuries later, during a quiet restoration of the chapel, where Anne was interred, a delicate skeleton was discovered, the slender bones and small skull thought to be hers. This time she was laid to rest with a dignity denied her in life. Yet the stone remains mostly unmarked, and the wind in the tower's corridors still carries the echo of a queen's final breath, a reminder that power is fleeting. Memory is fragile, and even in silence, the condemned may outlive their judges. Today, the place where Anne Boleyn met her fate is marked only by a stark pane of glass, glinting coldly on the Tower of London's shorn grass, a silent memorial adrift in the shadow of ancient stone. Each year, on the morning that echoes with the memory of her end, pale roses are strewn in quiet tribute petals, trembling against the English chill as if shivering with the ghosts that never left those grounds. Anne is remembered not simply as a figure lost to tragedy, but as a living symbol of the peril that haunts women who draw too close to the heart of power, a caution inscribed in history by hands too eager to erase and hearts too slow to forgive. Yet the final twist of fate would arrive not in the agony of that somber May dawn, but in the legacy that unfolded after. Her greatest triumph bloomed through the daughter for whom Henry had once nursed only disappointment. Elizabeth, inheriting the sharp mind and indomitable spirit of the mother she barely knew, ascended to the throne and, conscious of history's brutal lessons, shaped herself in Anne's shadow. She took the white falcon of the Boleyns as her own, a silent act of reclamation in the face of centuries of judgment. In a world eager to bind queens in marriage, Elizabeth remained resolutely unattached. Her voice rising above the whispers of court, she would be wed to no man but to England itself. Thus the reign of the Virgin Queen was forged atop the ashes of sacrifice, an unspoken testament to the mother's courage and the daughter's resolve. Anne's final walk across the graying lawn spine, unbowed and gaze unbroken, became a silent legacy, one that endures not in the memory of her suffering, but in the quiet dignity that carried her forward, and in the unyielding will of a daughter who would not be denied her place in the sun.